Joining us now, former Secretary of Defense and former Director of the CIA, Leon Panetta. It's very good to have you on the show. Your first question comes from Mike Barnicle. Mike?
Mr. Secretary, last week, a federal judge in Florida ruled that there is going to be perhaps a special master to overlook all of the documents that have been found by the FBI in former President Trump's house at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. My question to you, given the contents that we've been told are part of those documents, who would the special master be? I mean, to be looking at all sorts of highly classified documents. Who could do that?
Well, I think that's part of the problem with the decision. I agree with former Attorney General Barr that it's a bad decision and needs to be appealed. And I think the Justice Department will do that, because the reality is, if you are dealing with top secret classifications on documents, I don't know what kind of master you'd have to appoint in order to be able to have somebody who has the clearances necessary to make these decisions. In the end, it is the government's responsibility to look at these documents and to determine how they are to be maintained. And that I think, is the issue that is at stake here.
Mr. Secretary, good morning. It's Willie Geist. As someone who was the head of the Defense Department and who ran the CIA and has spent so much of his life protecting the United States of America, what is your reaction, first of all, just to seeing the sheer volume of documents discovered by the FBI at Mar-a-Lago, and then the classification of those documents?
Look, this is a very serious matter, and I think the American people need to understand how serious it is, because it involves our national security. Right. The reason we classify documents is in order to protect our national security and make sure that our adversaries, our enemies, are not going to get access to our most important secrets. And so that's why we provide the classification. That's why we provide the process of protecting those documents. That's why everyone who's involved with secret and top secret documents knows there is a procedure to follow in order to make sure that we don't jeopardize our national security. And to have a situation where these most sensitive documents have been thrown into a box and brought to a country club in Florida, where there's a very good chance our most important secrets could have been compromised as a result of that. I think this is a serious matter, and that ultimately this investigation, as it proceeds, has to determine who's going to be held accountable.
Mr. Secretary, legendary general and, of course, Secretary himself, George Marshall, bragged about the fact that he had never voted once in an election in his life, something that didn't make Harry Truman very happy. And he said he bragged that his father had never voted in an election because he was apolitical. He was a soldier. Things have changed dramatically, obviously, since George Marshall's time, Harry Truman's time. And you know it better than anybody. We live in a politically divided country. The recruits that we draw from to serve proudly in the armed forces are on social media that is hyper politicized. And so the challenge is how do we get them to come serve their country proudly and understand that when they put on the uniform, the politics remains outside the door?
Well, Joe, you're right. The lines have blurred, particularly over these last 4 years, with regards to the civilian-military relationship and what is expected of the military and what is expected of those that lead the military. That's why we came together, secretaries and former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to try to establish standards and principles that have always been in place, but that were pretty much rejected over these last 4 years. We've got to get back to the basics. You're in the military. You are committed to defending the country. You're committed to protecting this country. That's your primary role. And you're not entitled to simply engage in politics, political discussion, because that constitutional right, frankly, is not provided to those that defend the country and serve this country. Their primary role is to protect our national security. We've got to get back to that critical standard, because otherwise what you have is a slow deterioration of the discipline that is absolutely critical to having a strong military force.
A little more from the letter, which decries the extremely adverse political climate right now and warns that civilian-military relations are under extreme strain, stating in part, quote, geopolitically, the winding down of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the ramping up of great power conflict mean the U.S. military must simultaneously come to terms with wars that ended without all the goals satisfactorily accomplished, while preparing for more daunting competition with near-peer rivals. Socially, the pandemic and economic dislocations have disrupted societal patterns and put enormous strain on individuals and families. Politically, military professionals confront an extremely adverse environment characterized by the divisiveness of effective polarization that culminated in the first election in over a century, when the peaceful transfer of political power was disrupted and in doubt. Looking ahead, all of these factors could well get worse before they get better. And Mr. Secretary, if you could develop on that point, what are the risks that we're looking at here if something isn't done, and what is it that needs to be done?
Well, it goes to the heart of our concern about the survival of our democracy. January 6th was a wake-up call that our democracy is fragile and that it wouldn't take much to bring down a system of government that we all cherish in this country and we all have a responsibility to protect. So the polarization that we see that is kind of politically dividing the country is being reflected as well in the military and how the civilian-military relationship has played out. In the last 4 years, President Trump basically used the military as his own security force. He wanted to deploy them to the border. He wanted to deploy them against protesters. He wanted to, he was urged to actually take over the military during the time following the election. All dangerous steps that would undermine the traditional civilian-military relationship that is critical to the operation of our national security. So it's for all of those reasons that we felt it was critical to come together and reestablish the standards, the best practices of how we are to operate in a civilian-military relationship that is the bedrock of our democracy, but that has been blurred and weakened over these last number of years. That is something that is as critical to our national security as maintaining a strong defense force.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, I want to ask you, because of what you've seen, how long you've served this country, I want to ask you a very general question. You talk about a 30,000-foot question. But I think our viewers need to get your input on this. I want to talk about the state of this country. Day in and day out, we hear about the failings. We've heard about it. I've heard about it. I remember my 7th grade teacher telling me the United States was going to go the way of the Roman Empire, but we were in the middle of Vietnam, in the middle of Watergate. And I must say, the assessment from many hasn't gotten better since then. And yet, at least by my vantage point, we are economically the envy of the world, even with our challenges. Militarily, we've got a military that's second to none. Our soft power still far exceeds anybody else's soft power. The totalitarian, our authoritarian countries that we keep hearing are going to overtake us continue to stumble and get in their own way. I'm wondering in 2022, what is the state of the United States? And it's a big exclusion other than our calcified political system.
Joe, I think this country in 2022 can take one of two paths into the future. I honestly believe that America could be an American Renaissance in the 21st century, that we have a strong economy, we have a creative and innovative economy that is very strong in terms of its particulars. We can provide the training that young people need in order to embrace these new technologies that are coming about. We can actually come together and govern our country. We can exercise leadership in a very difficult world. We could be an American Renaissance, but we could also be an America in decline. If we allow our fears, our hates, our frustrations to divide us and to turn us against one another, I think there's a very good chance we could follow the path of past empires, and we could lose our democracy. What is going to be the key to what path we take? It's the quality of leadership that we elect in this country. If we have leadership that is willing to take the risks associated with leadership, and make no mistake about it, you want to lead in a democracy, you're going to have to take risks. You're going to have to do what's right for the country, not just what's right for your party or for yourself, but for the country. If we have that kind of leadership, I am very confident that we can have an American Renaissance.